Welcome, class. This is just a short video on how to write a thesis. Students ask me this question all the time. How do I write a thesis? Where do I come up with the ideas for it? But I think if you plan properly, you can develop a thesis at the beginning before you've even written the essay. But you need to call it at that point a working thesis. And what I mean by that is that's what you basically base everything, all of your research on. And then when you get to the end and you're done with your editing and your proofreading and your revising, look at your thesis one more time, because remember, it's in the introductory paragraph at the end. Look at it again and make sure that you have actually used that as your main idea. Sometimes you have to refine it a bit, change a word or two or three, depending on what you've done. So let's look a little bit about how you go about actually writing that thesis. So obviously, choose a topic. Explore the topic. You state a fact. You rephrase it to make it a debatable question. And you sort of tell the story of the argument or the sides, or your side, or the opposing side. Now, this is the important thing. You should look at the topic and then make it a question. Okay? That makes sense, right? Make it a question, because this is what we're going to do. Once you make that a question, you then are going to answer the question. So you start off with your topic, okay, the facts. People should have wild animals as pets. Okay, you can rephrase it as the question, should people have wild animals as pets? And then once you get to that point, you can realize side A, side B. Unfortunately, there's no middle side for this. Typically, in most arguments, there is no middle side. You have to go on one side of the fence or the other. There's no straddling the fence. Okay, so we have our fact. People have wild animals as pets. We rephrase it as a question. Should people have wild animals as pets? And then we answer it. People should be allowed. People should not be allowed. Okay, so we're starting to move towards something here, something that we could work with, something that we could use to base all of our research on. So let's take it one step further. When you're taking a position, you have to consider all sides, list the pros and cons. Actually, write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper. I know, those of you who love to work on a computer screen, write it down on a piece of paper. I truly believe the actual writing of something, the connection between the hand, the brain, and the paper is a beautiful thing. So try it. You might like it. Of course, when you're doing this, use the reporter method, the 5 W's and the H. Who, what, where, when, why, how. When you're doing this, you'll come up with crazy ideas. Write them all down. It doesn't matter at this point. No one's going to see this except you. And also the RENS technique. Now, the RENS technique it's an acronym, obviously. The R stands for reasons. The E stands for examples. The two N's, names, numbers, and the S stands for senses. So you're doing these two techniques, the reporter technique, the RENS technique, just to get all of the sides. Now, you're not doing research at this point. You're just pulling stuff out of your head and putting it on paper. What's the next step? Well, now is the time when you can develop your actual thesis. Your thesis is your position. Let's go back a second. Remember, we had the two sides? Well, you had to pick one. Remember, I said you couldn't stay in the middle. You can't straddle the fence on this. You have to pick one. So my position is people should not be allowed to own wild animals as pets. And this is so cool because this is now very rapidly becoming a working thesis. That's my position. What is the reason? It can be dangerous for animals and people. Watch what happens when you take the two and put them together. Your thesis then becomes your position and your reason. So this is the first version. People should not be allowed to own wild animals as pets because it can cause a potential danger to both the animals and the people. That's one version of it. And if you don't like that and you want to refine it a little bit, you can refine it to the second version. To eliminate dangerous situations for both animals and people, owning a wild animal as a pet should be illegal. Now, the first thesis I can use as my working thesis. And let's say I get to the end, I have the whole essay done. I'm revising, I'm editing, I'm proofreading. I come to that moment where I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to submit this. Stop. Look at your thesis. I looked at my thesis and I said, well, I could sort of change things around, not make it so specific and step it up a bit. And so that's where thesis number 2 came from. To eliminate dangerous situations for both animals and people, owning a wild animal as a pet should be illegal. Because I thought after a while that the first one seemed very judgmental. Okay, so I didn't want it to be judgmental. I want the thesis statement to be one that people will look at and say, wow, she's onto something here. Okay, all right. So the important thing when you're doing all of this beginning, pre-writing, trying to figure out what you're going to write about is to be fair. Don't insult the opposition. Think about your word choice and the connotation of your words. That's why I said that first thesis statement, the more I looked at it, the more I realized it was a little bit judgmental. So I didn't want to do that, but I wanted to be assertive. I also wanted to be courteous, and that's why that second version I felt was more assertive, less insulting, better word choice. And all of this together, what does this do? This establishes credibility and makes the essay stronger. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. I hope this helps.